Why did Stryker choose such a strange and crude method to sew Wade's mouth shut? What happened to his eyes? How was Deadpool able to control his body even after losing his head? And why was his regeneration so unstable that one of his eyes had to be covered with a patch? You'll find answers to these and other intriguing questions about our old friend, Weapon 11, also known as Deadpool, in this video. Don't forget to like and enjoy watching. His real name is Wade Wilson. He loves his katanas and is incredibly talkative, which often irritates those around him. That's Deadpool. However, in his first film adaptation released in 2009, where he served as the antagonist to another one of our old friend Logan, the movie X-Men Origins Wolverine completely ignored the details of his transformation. Unlike the earlier films X-Men and X-Men 2, this movie is full of plot inconsistencies and flawed romantic scenes. We'll discuss all of this in one of our future videos about Wolverine. So, don't expect a lot of detailed explanations regarding the transformations and anatomy of the local antagonist, Deadpool. However, some aspects are still present, and we'll discuss them further. In this adaptation, Wade was born a mutant. His abilities are comparable to those of another mutant, Zero. Their mutations include superhuman reflexes, incredible coordination, agility, and exceptional physical strength. The powerful jumps Wade performs would be impossible without extremely strong leg muscles. It was Wade's skills and abilities that made him the perfect foundation for Stryker's experiments, which led to the creation of Weapon 11. Its designation comes directly after Logan. The mission of this obedient super soldier is to eliminate other mutants. Stryker spent many years studying the abilities of mutants that could coexist within a single body without destroying it. However, the selection of such abilities turned out to be quite limited. Additionally, he replicated Scott Summers' Cyclops mutation to equip Weapon 11 with devastating laser beams emitted from its eyes. Nevertheless, the head protection of Weapon 11 against the extreme heat generated during the activation of the beams proved to be insufficient. Upon closer inspection, you can see how adamantium heats up around the eye sockets. While Scott's destructive abilities were fully transferred to Pool, his adaptive traits were not. Thus, the 11th Deadpool inherited the powers of 6 mutants: Wade Wilson, Wolverine, Technopath Chris Bradley, Teleporter John Wraith, Scott Summers, and Jason Stryker. The latter is Stryker's own son. According to him, his son was the first step in creating the ideal soldier of the future. The brain of one mutant, numbered 143, secreted a special fluid that allowed control over other mutants. It was this fluid that made Wade Wilson obedient. Before the transformation, Wade was kept alive since a dead body would be of no use to Stryker. With his mind wiped and mouth sewn shut, Wade remained conscious throughout this time. The final piece in creating Pool was Logan's mutation. Once adamantium was successfully implanted into his body, Stryker confirmed that Logan's DNA was perfectly compatible with the alien metal. Logan's regeneration not only helped him survive the procedure, but also prevented his body from rejecting adamantium as a foreign element. This healing ability enabled Wade to survive a similar procedure with adamantium and endure all subsequent modifications. It's also worth noting the mutation of Chris Bradley. He could control electronics, generate and store electricity, and act as a kind of radio receiver, picking up signals. Stryker used this method of remote communication to control Weapon 11 as well. Furthermore, it's likely that Bradley's abilities allowed Pool to survive even after being decapitated, as shown in the post-credits scene. Stryker emphasized twice that the only way to kill Logan was to sever his head. He gave a similar order to Deadpool. However, this didn't work on Pool himself, as Logan's abilities combined with Bradley's mutation allowed him to control nerve signals remotely. While Scott Summers' powers were intended for use in Weapon 11, Stryker didn't have enough time to properly study and adapt them for integration. While he spent years carefully selecting combinations of other mutants' abilities, Scott's genetic material only came into his possession a few hours before Pool's activation. Additionally, the eye modifications of Weapon 11 seem rather unplanned. It's also worth noting that in the case of young Scott Summers, a standard saliva sample was insufficient for collecting genetic material. On Stryker's island, it appears that his eyes were directly harvested for donor tissue, as bloodstains are visible on his eye bandage. This process was likely extremely painful. Wade's eyes, meanwhile, seem to have been completely removed for later modifications and placed into metallic casings, perhaps to protect his skull from high temperatures. These structures were even screwed into place. The most intriguing detail is that holes were drilled into Wade's adamantium skull to allow access to his optic nerves and muscles via surgical tools. This highlights the improvised nature of the eye modifications. Similar to earlier films, this adaptation shows surgical lines on Logan's body during the adamantium bonding procedure. Small round marks indicate needle entry points. In Wolverine's case, these marks don't always align properly, which can be attributed to film inconsistencies, as some needles were simply omitted in certain shots. While everything appeared perfect in Stryker's computer visualization, the needle marks on Deadpool suggest that adamantium was injected precisely into these points. The markings on his body are significantly larger compared to Logan. For instance, Logan had only 2 entry points for adamantium on his entire chest, whereas Poole has 8 just on the front, not to mention the others. At first glance, this might suggest that Poole's skeleton was more advanced, but the reality is different. It's likely due to the lower level of automation in the procedure compared to Logan. After Logan's escape, the general criticized Stryker for spending $500 million on upgrading the test subject's skeleton, pointing out that the military budget is not unlimited. Additionally, he didn't share Stryker's enthusiasm for creating an army of adamantium soldiers. As a result, the increased reliance on manual labor in Poole's modification became a necessary measure to reduce production costs. Some might argue that automation reduces production costs. To that, I would reply, this is true, but only in the case of mass production, not one-off manufacturing. On Stryker's island, a small capacity device was used in his lab, an improvised mechanism for manually injecting adamantium. It worked in conjunction with another system shown in the frame, which provided pre-prepared access to specific parts of the test subject's skeleton. It's unlikely that this setup was used for fixing fractures. As a result, the entire process of embedding adamantium into Weapon 11 became more drawn out, localized, and most importantly, segmented into stages. This procedure strongly resembles what we saw in Logan's flashbacks from earlier films, where the focus was more on the manual labor of engineers and scientists. When it comes to the most memorable features of this Deadpool's appearance, Stryker once remarked that Wade would be the perfect soldier if he didn't have a mouth. Ultimately, Stryker decided to remove Wade's mouth, doing so in a cruel and brutal manner. Wade's mouth became a fused scar that was far from aesthetically pleasing. In the early stages of the experiments, Wade's mouth was simply sewn shut. This decision is puzzling, given that Stryker could have silenced Wade by issuing a specific command. It might be tied to an off-screen backstory of Wade's transformation that wasn't included in the movie. Wade remained alive and therefore conscious during certain stages of his transformation, which allowed him to continue irritating Stryker with his incessant chatter. This behavior is reminiscent of Wade's interactions with Ajax in the 2016 film. Even after Wade's mouth was sewn shut and his mind suppressed, he continued to display sardonic emotions. This likely pushed Stryker to the brink, leading him to cut out Wade's mouth along with a significant portion of his lower jaw tissue. Wade's lower jaw is visibly scarred, suggesting a crude operation in poorly healed tissues. It's worth noting that Wade's head regeneration, despite his newly acquired abilities from Logan, is far less effective compared to the rest of his body. For instance, the previously removed skin around his eyes did not heal properly after activation, leaving exposed sections of his adamantium skeleton. In different scenes, this is depicted inconsistently, but it appears to be bare adamantium. His left eye even had to be patched with tape. There are 2 possible reasons. The first was mentioned by Stryker's chief medic. At the time of activation, Poole's merging process was not yet complete. She claimed that Weapon 11's abilities were not fully operational, as a few more hours of work were required. Stryker activated him in haste, which could explain the unhealed needle marks on his body. The second reason lies in Poole's head, which is the most complicated Frankenstein monster of his body. In addition to adamantium, it contains other artificial and foreign elements. To prevent his regeneration from rejecting these components, it had to be deliberately limited. This makes Weapon 11's head especially vulnerable to attacks. The most anatomically illogical part of Deadpool's body is the long adamantium blades implanted by Stryker. These are a modification of his beloved katanas. In theory, these blades could be stored inside his arms, but it would prevent him from bending his elbows. However, in the film, he does this, as seen in the scene following his activation. For example, in the scene where Stryker kills the general, it is shown that this weapon consists of a long, solid adamantium blade. Its base was altered to allow fixation in Wade's wrist or hand, in combination with other implanted adamantium elements. Regardless, the story of Weapon 11 is not just about superweapons. It's also about how the joke about katanas at his ex-girlfriend's wedding might have a hint of truth. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel, like, leave a comment, and share it with your friends. See you soon.